audience, today we're going to listen to a speech, at least part of it, by a young man named Alex O'Connor. Have a listen. Keep in mind, this is an animal rights activist, an animal defender. He became vegan just 1 or 2 years ago.
Of racial justice. We quite rightly condemn his historic abuses and prejudices. But for those who think it's right to cancel historical figures for their ethical violations, I caution you to consider with what judgmental eyes future historians will one day look upon you when it comes to light that you weren't a bastion of moral perfection yourself. It's very obvious that our present society is currently engaging in actions that future historians will look back upon with horror and embarrassment.
He's talking about the way that we treat animals now. He thinks that future generations will look back upon our society right now with absolute horror and condemnation.
The most obvious candidate here is our current abuse of non-human animals in factory farms so that we can enjoy the taste of their flesh and secretions.
He says non-human animals because he thinks that we are all animals. We actually are. But he specifies that instead of just saying animals, he says non-human animals. We are human animals, the rest, non-human animals.
Factory farms are industrialized engines of animal cruelty.
Factory farms are industrialized engines of animal cruelty.
In the future, we'll look back with shame on how we once tolerated this with folded arms.
The future will look back with shame. What he means by with folded arms, it's like, well, who cares about the animals? That's the attitude of a large amount of people today. But in the future, people will look back upon you, most of you who are watching, with shame, unless you change.
But that's not really fair of me to say, is it? That's not a fair comparison. I mean, you're a good person, you do good things, you sometimes give to charity, etc. Yeah, we may have an ethical blind spot on something like animal abuse, but who can blame us? We're only human. Ethical blind spot?
Ethical blind spot? It's an ethical blind spot? No, it's not a blind spot. It's a glaring flag. It is a red light. It is a bunch of animal rights activists saying, hello, this is not just a blind spot. You know what goes on. We have all of the hidden footage. You need to be vegan. We need a vegan society. The animals are suffering terribly right now.
Is what I would hear the future responding. Factory farming was responsible for causing pandemics, antibiotic resistance.
Let's write all those down, shall we? Pandemics. Pandemics. Factory farming is responsible for pandemics. Let's go back a tiny bit.
Ethical blind spot is what I would hear the future responding. Factory farming was responsible for causing pandemics, antibiotic resistance, ruining our health, destroying our ecosystem, and perpetuating animal torture. How can you call this
antibiotic resistance? This is what happens because of the animal agriculture industry. Let's go back and write them all down.
Responsible for causing pandemics, antibiotic resistance, ruining our health, destroying our ecosystem, and perpetuating animal torture. How can you call this a mere blind spot? It's indicative of an inexcusable moral laziness. And guess what? They're right. We are.
Pandemics, antibiotic resistance, ruining our health. That's right. We should not be having any dead animals in hospitals or schools or their secretions. We should be teaching people how to be healthy by eating whole foods.
How can you call this a mere blind spot? It's indicative of an inexcusable moral laziness. And guess what? They're right. We are all complicit in inexcusable crimes that will one day be looked back upon with shame and embarrassment and confusion about how otherwise morally sensible people allowed it to continue. We know this. Yet if it is true that historical figures should be cancelled on the basis of their ethical anachronisms, then we're not just committed to expecting that we'll all be cancelled ourselves in years to come for our current severe ethical failings. We're committed to positively advocating that this happen. Now, of course, you're welcome to take that view if you like.
Let me go back a little bit more because I wanted to write all of these things down, and I don't think I went back.
Antibiotic resistance, ruining our health, destroying our ecosystem, and perpetuating animal torture. How can you call this a mere blind spot? It's indicative of an inexcusable moral laziness. And guess what? They're right. We are all complicit in inexcusable crimes that will one day be looked back upon with shame and embarrassment and confusion about how other...
Do you remember what they all are? The reasons to be vegan? Because we don't want to cause pandemics. We don't want there to be antibiotic resistance. That means when we start to get sick and we start to take antibiotics, they won't work anymore because we've used them so much in cattle and in other different animals. Ruining our health, that's another reason to be vegan, because we want healthy children. We want a healthy society. Destroying our ecosystem. It is awful. Animal agriculture is terrible for the ecosystem. So let's go back and make sure we get the last one there. Or make sure we
antibiotic resistance, ruining our health, destroying our ecosystem, and perpetuating animal torture. How can you call this a mere blind spot? It's indicative of an inexcusable moral laziness. And guess what? They're right. We are all complicit in inexcusable crimes that will one day be looked back upon with shame and embarrassment and confusion about how otherwise morally sensible people allowed it to continue. We know this. Yet if it is true that historical figures should be cancelled on the basis of their ethical anachronisms, then we're not just committed to expecting that we'll all be cancelled ourselves in years to come for our current severe ethical failings. We're committed to positively advocating that this happen. Now, of course, you're welcome to take that view, if you like. I'm only looking for consistency here. But if you do, I excitedly wait the day when you have to convince your peers to take down statues of Martin Luther King because he used to eat meat.
Isn't that interesting? So they're thinking of taking down the statue of Churchill, Winston Churchill, because he didn't have very good views when it comes to races. He was a racist, but he did a lot of other good things. But should we take down his whole statue just because of that? Alex O'Connor is arguing that no, we should not. And he is giving the example that Martin Luther King, who was a great man, who defended the blacks, and he spoke out on behalf of the innocent, the victims. What about him? Should we be taking down, or will we in the future take down his statue because he was eating animals? He was paying for their rape, their suffering, their torture, and their murder. What about you guys? What about if one of you wants to run for office one day? Will we dig up the past? In the future, I mean, in 20, 30 years, we will look back and say, well, that vegan teacher told you to be vegan. And you said, fuck you. I'm going to go ahead and keep eating animals anyway. You knew better. Are they going to start then canceling you from Twitter, from TikTok, from Instagram, from YouTube because of who you were at this time? Well, be careful, because if we continue with cancel culture, that's exactly where we're leading. So there's two things that we can do. One is be really careful with who we cancel. And two, be really careful with who you are right now. Who are you? What kind of choices are you making? Are you helping or are you hindering progress? Are you helping the world to be a better place, to be a kinder place? Or are you making it worse?
That's the same MLK, by the way, who did say that riots are the language of the unheard, in exactly the same speech that he condemned riots as harming the cause of civil rights.
Interesting. Now he's talking about Martin Luther King because he studied him, and he's saying how he himself contradicted himself.
I excitedly wait the day when you have to convince your peers to take down statues of Martin Luther King because he used to eat meat. That's the same MLK, by the way, who did say that riots are the language of the unheard.
Riots are the language of the unheard, is what he said. So he was kind of advocating for them. On the other hand, he was saying, no, we need to be peaceful.
In exactly the same speech that he condemned riots as harming the cause of civil rights.
Isn't that fascinating? I never knew that. But Alex did some studying. He did a lot of research, and that is what he noticed in that speech.
During the Black Lives Matter riots, I conducted a study on everything MLK ever wrote on riots, which you can find on my Twitter if you so please. In conclusion, do you really think, I like to ask the opposition, that cancel culture will encourage people to acknowledge and make amends for things they've said in the past in a time since when they've grown and morally evolved? Do you think that cancel culture will encourage people to actively seek out previous notions they clung to or jokes they used to think were appropriate in order to learn from their mistakes and apologize? Of course it won't. If, when these things come to light, we unforgivingly cancel those responsible and forever tarnish their character, all you will see is a manic scramble for people to annihilate any records of their previous behavior for fear that the pitchforks will one day point in their direction. The question you must ask is this: do you want people to live up to your ideal moral standards for fear of repercussion, or because they've genuinely evolved and now believe them to be desirable? This kind of latter evolution can only happen, ladies and gentlemen, if people are given the opportunity to do so without fear that treading wrongly might trigger a nuclear mine. This motion should therefore carry. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and I do think that the Oxford Union's YouTube channel and Cosmic Skeptic, your channel, is probably the most ambitious crossover since Avengers Infinity War, so thank you.
All right, so he talks about his channel, so I want to point that out too. His channel is Cosmic Skeptic. Cosmic Skeptic, do you see it there? Cosmic Skeptic. He has almost, he has 432,000 subscribers. I suggest you have a look at it and listen to all of what he's talking about. There are so many interesting talks he has about religion, and he truly has a way with words. I could listen to him all day, and I could learn a lot. I am, just like you, here in the School of Life to learn. And I'm so happy that Alex O'Connor, who is so brilliant, became vegan because he studied all of these things. He studied pandemics, antibiotic resistance. He studied what happens to our health when we are not vegan. He studied about what happens with the environment, and most importantly, he really connected with the animals and understood that they suffer. And you know, Alex, I'm so proud of you, and I am so happy to have discovered you. And I give you an A+. You absolutely deserve it for this wonderful speech. Excellent speech. Thank you so much to everybody who's watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Alex O'Connor, whose name again is Cosmic Skeptic, and also to this channel, That Vegan Teacher. There's a little notification bell. Do you see it down there? Press that as well. Press the bell, and then you can be with me, and we're going to be learning together for a long time to come. And coming up on the screen, you're going to see a bunch of other videos. If you haven't seen those yet, go ahead and click on them. Be curious. Have a look around my site and see all kinds of stuff. I should also mention Alex O'Connor, as if he's not great enough, his brain isn't great enough, and his heart is clearly great enough that he became an animal defender. He is also extremely talented. He plays the guitar and sings like 1,000 times better than I do. So go and definitely check him out and support him. And thank you again, everybody, for being here. I'll see you in the next video.